Hello there, welcome to the Ecological Corner by Daisy with Z. So in today's video, we're going to be looking at hazards. So a hazard is anything that has potential to cause harm. It could be ecological, environmental, or human induced. So specifically in this video, we're going to be looking at one example of hazards, which are meteorological hazards. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Let us go straight into the video. So remember, on this channel, I try to bring to you scientific terms and concepts, but then explaining them to you in the easiest and simplest ways possible, because in the end, what we want is to make this world a better place and that people are able to understand how environmental issues actually work and how they affect us in the long run. So let us begin. So in this video, we're going to look at examples of meteorological hazards, their causes, their effects, and our actions, what you and I can do to actually make a difference to protect and preserve the environment. So let us also now understand what we mean by meteorology. So meteorology, we are simply talking about everything weather, everything that has to do with atmospheric conditions. So I'll make a separate video in terms of the determinants of meteorology, but here are some of the examples, such as the direction of the wind, temperature of air, humidity, as well as pressure in the atmosphere. So I'll make a separate video. Please do let me know if you actually want me to make this separate video. But in this video, I want us to tackle specific things that I earlier mentioned. So let us go straight into that. A meteorological hazard is a type of natural hazard that is caused by extreme weather patterns or atmospheric conditions, and these vary and have different effects on the environment as well as human life. So here are three main things to remember about meteorological hazards. Number one, they are weather and atmospheric induced hazards. Number two, they result from extreme weather patterns and they cause extreme weather patterns. Number three, they can be within a short period of time or noticed within a long period of time. So the first basic thing to understand is that a hazard is anything that has potential to cause harm. So meteorological hazards are a potential danger caused by extreme weather conditions. So there are several types or examples of meteorological hazards, and then I'm going to just touch on them quickly before I delve into the two main things that I want to focus on in this video. So there's what we call lightning. So lightning is just a giant spark of electricity in the atmosphere, and this could happen between clouds and within clouds, or between the clouds and the ground. And so this is an example of a meteorological hazard. Also have what we call a thunderstorm. A thunderstorm is simply a type of a storm that is characterized by the presence of lightning and thunder, and this one is mostly characterized or accompanied by heavy rainfall, maybe strong winds. Okay, so what happens is that these ones are more common in tropical and subtropical regions like Zambia. We do experience thunderstorms. Another example of a meteorological hazard is a heat wave. So a heat wave is simply an extended period of unusually hot weather, extreme hot weather, not just for a few days or a few hours, but for a prolonged period of time. And you find that there's excessive heat. Then we have what we call a heat wave. Our last example of the meteorological hazard today is a cyclone. So a cyclone is a powerful, harsh, and very dangerous rotating storm. So what this means is that these storms actually rotate in the counterclockwise direction in the northern hemisphere and clockwise in the southern hemisphere. That is a lot of science, but I'll find a way to explain this in the easiest way in a couple of videos to come in the nearest future. At this point, let us go straight and look at the two very important meteorological hazards that I'm interested in this video, which are floods and droughts. So very commonly, these hazards are also regarded as hydrometeorological hazards. So as we can see in this picture, land is submerged by water and people are failing to pass, people are failing to walk. Cars are actually almost drowning in this water. But what does this mean? This means that a flood is just an overflow of water, and what this does is that it submerges land that is usually normal. So you find that even when there are tarred roads, they become submerged in water. That is what a flood is. So what this means is that on a normally dry land, on a normally dry area, when there is an overflow of water, maybe due to rainfall or just simply a water overflow whereby a water body like a river, a lake, an ocean becomes overwhelmed, and then the normal boundaries of that water body can no longer hold that water, then what results is a flood. So you find that even in places where there is dry land, like in towns, in cities, in homes, they are swept away because the water, it cannot move. That's exactly what we mean when we talk about floods. So simply put, too much water, too much rain results in floods. But the opposite of that results in what we're about to look at, which is a drought. So a drought is a prolonged period of abnormally low rain, low to little or no rain at all. So what this does is that it leads to shortage of water. And when there's no water, it means that there is pure dryness. There's what we call a dry spell. So dry spells and droughts are actually used interchangeably, but in the future, maybe I'll make a video, but these are actually not completely the same thing. So now that we have understood what floods and droughts are, let us look at what causes these phenomena. So number one, in terms of floods, as we have already said, these ones are caused by extreme rainfall, and the opposite happens for the droughts, which are caused by too little or no rain at all. So the other thing, both floods and droughts are caused by human activities. That means that whatever we do as human beings has a potential to cause harm to the environment, either by draining out the potential water sources or by increasing the amount of rainfall that we actually get, which are both extreme temperatures, as we have already established. But then also structural failures such as poor drainages can actually exacerbate or increase floods. But while these speak a lot to environmental policy and structural failures, issues to do with floods, for example, in terms of poor drainage systems, have to do with people throwing trash in drainages and then in the end blocking them. So in the end, human activities have a role to play in both floods and droughts. In terms of droughts, for example, poor management of water resources, wasting water could result in droughts. So how do these hazards affect the environment? So in terms of floods, when there's too much water, when there's an overflow, it is bound to destroy vegetation. Crops are swept away, houses are swept away. It also causes soil erosion. It kills aquatic life like fish, anything that is in the water body, because I've already talked about the fact that this overwhelms the water bodies. And then this also causes issues to do with pollution, because as water is swept out, sometimes it carries contaminants, and then if it lands in aquatic water systems, for example, that means that aquatic life is threatened. But also there's an aspect of diseases. In Zambia, we have what we call cholera. And in terms of floods, where there is a lot of floods, we are bound to have a lot of such diseases because water is contaminated, food becomes contaminated. And so when we drink contaminated water or eat contaminated food, maybe out of fecal matter and anything that could have an infectious bacteria, you find that people have what we call cholera. And so in terms of droughts, what happens that when there's shortage of water, crops are bound to die and dry out. The quality of the soil becomes very poor. So it means that even agriculture activities or vegetation cannot be maintained. Then there's also pressure in terms of groundwater, which we actually depend on for us to access clean and safe water as we live in our cities, in our towns. And in terms of biodiversity loss, we're just talking about the different species, different types of organisms that make up life on Earth. So where there is no water, it means that food production becomes scarce, resources are bound to be exploited. I believe at this point we're able to see that whatever affects the environment also affects human well-being. So in terms of floods and droughts, their effects on human being could range from food crisis, where there's extreme hunger, increased poverty, water problems, sanitation issues, increased diseases, as we've already explained in the previous clips, loss of homes where they are swept, where they're submerged, death in extreme conditions where people are not able to actually survive those extreme weather events or the weather patterns, and also emotional distress out of maybe loss of beloved ones because of maybe there was a flood and then the house was swept out and then children died, others escaped. There's that emotional stress and just loss of property. So whatever we do on the environment eventually affects us as human beings. So what can you and I do to save the earth? Here are some of the things we can do to actually just show love to our environment. Love the environment. Here is how. So number one, do not cut trees. In my next video, I'm going to look at what trees do to help the environment. Number two, plant more trees. Number three, reduce the amount of waste in your environment. Number four, do not throw trash or litter in the drainages because that causes them to block and therefore fail to make sure that water flows nicely and freely. The other thing we must do is that we must not misuse water. Don't keep taps running. Do not overwhelm water resources. The other one is that you need to hold your leaders accountable, your council workers, hold them accountable, but you can only hold them accountable after you have done your own part as a good citizen. And then the most important thing is that we must educate, sensitize, and advocate for positive environmental actions. Our behaviors must be able to speak love for the environment to ensure that our actions do not harm the environment. And then lastly, we must start today because today is when change can begin. So there you have it. I really hope you've understood this in the simplest ways and you are convinced to stay. Please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Until next time, please love, protect, and safeguard the environment. I'll see you in my next video.